It is.
I'll just. So this is the last topic of the series, I guess.
Yes. Let's start.
Should we start?
Yeah, we should.
All right. So, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Chetan Mundra. I am lead pediatric intensivist at Yashoda Hospital, Secunderabad, and senior pediatrician over there. So today we'll be briefly discussing about X-rays in children. So scope is when we talk of X-rays, what is the basic terminology in radiography, and what are the methods in reading X-rays, especially the chest X-ray and the neck X-rays, and then we'll have case scenario based discussion. So what are X-rays? X-rays are form of ionizing electromagnetic radiation which are produced by a cathode using a high voltage current to accelerate the electrons. And what are the body positions? So we have erect X-ray, which is in either taken in standing or sitting position. Decubitus is in lying down position. Supine is in lying on back. Trendelenburg is supine with head lower than the feet, and lateral decubitus is lying on one side. This is just for the sake of giving a technical touch to it. I'm sure everybody of you are aware of all this. And we have right lateral where the right side touches the cassette, and the left lateral where the left side touches the cassette. The projections are either anterior or posterior, where the central rays they pass perpendicular to the coronal plane from anterior to posteriorly, and this is one of the most common view projection we use in children, because taking a PA view sometimes is not possible in small kids who are not that cooperative, because the child has to face away from everybody and has to face to the cassette in PA view, and it is not possible every time to get that cooperation. So in posterior anterior wave, the central ray passes perpendicular to coronal plane from the posterior to anterior side. So depending on the area we are using, it can be occipitofrontal in skull, or it can be dorsoventral in thorax. Then we have lateral projection. So central rays are perpendicular to the sagittal plane, and they pass through or parallel to the sagittal plane from one side of the body to the other. And oblique is when the central ray passes through body part through a plane at an angle to the transverse of the coronal plane. So what are the planes? It is important for CT and MRI. Axial plane, the transverse plane, is horizontal plane perpendicular to the long axis of the body. Sagittal plane is vertical plane parallel to the median plane, and coronal plane is vertical plane parallel to the sagittal. So when we see an X-ray, we have to first see to it that the radiographer has taken the X-ray properly or not, and for which we can use the acronym PACEMAN. So in which P stands for positioning. Is the positioning correct or not? Is the child in rotation or what? And then is the film adequate? Is it in proper inspiration? At the end of inspiration, is the area of interest properly getting covered? And then is there a collimation present or not? So what is collimation? Collimation is limiting of the X-ray beam to the particular area of interest, so that you don't take an infantogram when you are required to take a chest X-ray, which is very commonly seen in NICUs or in babies who are 1 or 2 year old. So the whole beam is basically you are exposing the child to the whole area. So you have to make sure that there is a collimation which is appropriate. Exposure, whether it is underexposed or overexposed, because that can also lead to misinterpretation in chest X-ray. And is there a marker present? and whether the marker is applied is correct or not. Many times you may notice that the right and left the markers, they are inappropriately placed. And then aesthetics is whenever, especially children who are in ICU, where you have lot many tubes and wires of different devices connected to the patient and going from across the patient. So that needs to be made sure that they are all taken into the side and they are not interfering in the and also in ambulatory patients, clothing and various metallic objects. So those things need to be removed properly. And finally, we have to make sure that the name of the patient is correct and we are evaluating the proper patient's X-ray. So we'll straight away come to reading a chest X-ray. Basically, whenever we this is one of the most common investigation radiologically which is ordered, and we have to just have a structured method of reading a chest X-ray, and we keep using it consistently so that we don't miss out on any important abnormalities, which we will if we use it in a cursory manner or if we start using shortcuts. So every time we keep telling our students also that do not rely on anybody else's judgment. Look at your patient's X-rays yourself, and also take into consideration the clinical picture of the patient. If you have any doubt, you have to go back to history and ask the relevant history to the child, to the parents, and then again interpret the X-ray findings accordingly. As we go forward, we'll see the importance of all these points. So one simple method of interpretation is, if you follow it and you consistently keep following it and you keep practicing, is you interpret the X-ray, you see the X-ray, you read the X-ray from outside inwards. So first, especially the chest X-ray. So first is the soft tissue shadow, then comes the bones of the ribs and the whatever bones which are visible, the humerus and the scapula and the clavicles. Then how are the domes of diaphragm? Are they positioned properly, or is there any abnormality in their positioning? Is there any air under the diaphragm? And what is the airway? How is the airway? Is there trachea in the midline, or is it there is some buckling? There's some. Is there any abnormality in the airway? And what is the heart shadow? How is the heart shadow? And then how is the superior mediastinum, and are the hilar shadows appropriate? And then what about costophrenic angles? And finally, we look at the lung fields, and then we also have to make sure that we know the tubes and the devices which are there. So as we move forward, so an ideal chest X-ray, it should be an end inspiratory film. The diaphragm should be at the 8th or 10th rib posteriorly and 5th to 6th rib anteriorly. In ICUs, in emergencies, if you are taking a supine EP view, make sure that you are able to see 10 posterior or 6 anterior ribs in the X-ray. So that will be termed as a adequate area exposure. And whether the exposure of the radiation and penetration is adequate or not, that also you have to ensure. So if the vertebral column is too translucent, that means it's an overexposed film. If the vertebral column, if you're able to see the intervertebral space properly, at the same time you are able to delineate the vertebral bodies, that means the exposure is proper, and there is minimal rotation, which is many times difficult in children because they don't cooperate and they get frightened by the machine and the whole atmosphere. So what's the difference between AP view and PA view, and why we say that if it is possible we can get PA view of children, otherwise in X-ray, in chest X-ray, or AP view is also okay. So we have to ensure that whenever you are taking AP view, the heart may appear a little magnified, a little larger. So do not base your assumption of cardiomegaly on that view solely, which is not a problem in the PA view. The heart details are not that well visualized, but in PA view it is very well delineated. And ribs, they appear parallel. In the PA view, the anterior ends will look downwards, and the clavicles are higher up in position in AP view, and they are normal in the PA views. In AP view, we see the scapulae, they are sharper and they are close to the film, and in PA view, they are more likely to be drawn laterally so that they don't interfere in your lung shadows interpretation. The cervical disc space is more clear in AP view. In PA view, it is less clear. So these are some differences in PA versus AP view. So now we move on quickly to the cases. So this is a child who is 9-year-old, known case of asthmatic, and had a exacerbation and had severe bouts of cough and vomiting with retching. And the child has presented to the ER. So here, if we see what is prominent, if you look at the X-ray and you start going from outwards to inwards, what is prominent is we have the subcutaneous hair, which is visible all up to here, and here. So this is kind of a spontaneous subcutaneous emphysema, and we are not able to actually delineate pneumomediastinum. Here it is not that clear, but this is definitely a case of subcutaneous emphysema, and you have to keep this child under observation. You have to take care of the asthmatic exacerbation, and you have to be little more careful about the hemodynamics. So this is another child who is, the parents are complaining of restlessness and irritability. The child is looked after by a caretaker when both the parents are working, and they just feel that the child is not his or her usual self. And when we look at the X-ray and we go methodically, so the soft tissues are fine. When we look at the bones and we see the bones, you have here, there is fracture. So this is what we classically call as non-accidental injuries, where the child abuse fractures. So rib fractures are very common in these cases, and that's why we need to make sure that whenever we are looking at the X-rays, we look it in a methodical manner. So now this is a 12-year-old child with tachypnea and abdominal pain with a low-grade fever. In the last 2 days, the fever has increased since morning. So what we see here is, if we come from outwards to inwards, the soft tissue, which is not very evident in here, the bones, they are okay. And when we come to the dome of diaphragm, we see that there is a air under the diaphragm, and here we need to ensure that we are ruling out the intestinal perforation. So this is a child, 6-year-old with fever since 2 days, and the referring hospital has referred this child in view of increased respiratory distress and reduced air entry on the left side. And they've taken an X-ray in the emergency, and they thought that this is a whole whiteout of the lung. So it looks like some sort of pneumonia or empyema. And the child was sent to the tertiary care hospital. So whenever I always keep doing it myself and keep telling all my residents that whenever you are having an X-ray, make sure you view it in a view box. The moment you view it in a view box, you basically try to pay attention and you start your methodical way of interpreting it. And here, if you look closely, what you see is, the obvious is the left hemithorax is completely whitened out. But what is seen here is this artifact. So first thing which we thought was, is there anything in her, something like a locket or something, or is there anything in her dress? So that was ruled out. And then this was something which was not expected at all. Why this child is having such a huge kind of artifactual shadow? So we kept digging for the history, and then like what has happened? Is the child having any other issues? Uh, has she swallowed something? So the father was like, no, there was nothing like that. She had similar breathing difficulty 3 months ago. We have X-ray of that time also. And when we asked him about the X-ray, in an hour he could produce that X-ray, and that made our job much easier. So this was 3 months ago for this child, and the same shadow is there. Now then when we asked it, what is this? We are not sure if she has not swallowed something. Are you sure that she has choked upon something or something? Then he said, 10 months ago we have shifted house, and the dressing table which was being loaded uh, on the truck, and child fell upon it, and the mirror broke. And that time she had a injury in her on her throat. But then we took her to the doctor, and he saw it, and he said everything is fine, and just put up some stitches, and we dressed it, and we got back to our work of shifting. And after 5 to 6 months, when they had this repeated respiratory issues, so they got a chest X-ray done, and the child was given some oral medications, and the fever subsided, and they forgot about it. So when we did a CT scan and everything, then it got clear that there was a some sort of piece which was transecting the bronchus, and has occluded the left bronchus, and the left lung was totally gone. So the child had to undergo pneumonectomy, and we could retrieve this mirror piece, which was so long, and it was just like miraculous how the child survived that, and it all went on without anybody's noticing. And even though there was a history where the child was taken to a local doctor and was attended to, but nothing else was done, and the child ultimately lost one lung due to this. So it's very important that whenever we are coming across uh, an X-ray where whatsoever you are in a hurry, make sure that you give time to it, and you put it in a view box, and just scan it in a methodical manner, so that you don't lose up upon something like this. So this is a 10-year-old Down syndrome with severe respiratory distress and hepatomegaly. This is a child who had AVSD and a huge globular heart. She also had anemia, and because of that, this is looking like a very dilated kind of a heart. So this is a 11-year-old with fever for 2 weeks and fair degree of weight loss. On examination, clinical examination, child had mild petechial rashes and axillary lymph nodes, and the X-ray is very much suggestive of a mediastinal enlargement. So as we go from outward to inwards, this is something which we need to always remember to look at. And the child was found to have T-cell lymphoma and was being treated. So this is a child with 2-year-old and had persistent cough since 3 days. The cough was very hacking kind of a cough. It was disturbing the child's sleep, and child was on bronchodilators and nebulizations because the mother thought that this is something similar which happened 3 months ago, and she started things on her own. And then when the chest X-ray was done, when we could see that there is in the airway, there is some kind of object. paper clip which the child swallowed, and it was retrieved by rigid bronchoscopy. So another 1.5 year old male who was presented with fever for a day and has respiratory distress for 12 hours with bilateral crepitations, but more on the left side. And this is something which is a rapid picture. And if you look, even though the quality of the X-ray is not good, what you can see is you have necrotizing pneumonia picture with cavitations inside. So this is a very typical picture of a necrotizing pneumonia. Most likely organism is Staphylococcus and needs to be dealt with in an aggressive manner. So this is a same child can present like this also, that you have fever, you have respiratory distress, which is rapidly increasing. And then when you look at the things, there is a mediastinal shift and you have full translucency here, the loss of lung markings, and this is a tension pneumothorax kind of picture. Then this is a newborn with respiratory distress, and you can make out that the child's nasogastric tube has gone looped all the way to the lung field area, and this is a CDH, congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So another child who has presented to us, 5-year-old, and had respiratory difficulty and stridor since 24 hours. The child has been to a government hospital, X-rays were taken, and because he was unable to eat and all, they have even put a nasogastric tube, and X-ray was taken even again after that. Because the respiratory distress was increasing and the child had increasing stridor, was sent to a government ENT hospital. And there they have taken a lateral X-ray, and because they didn't have a pediatric backup, they asked to shift the child to a pediatric hospital, and the child landed up to us. So when we saw the child, we had these two X-ray, and the way child's breathing was and the stridor, it was very much imminent that some upper airway pathology is definitely there. And when we put up the X-ray on the view box and started looking at it, because we were focusing on the upper airway problem here, and then in the X-ray here also, we thought that there is some problem, but we were not sure because the exposure and all is not good. So by the time the X-ray of lateral neck also came up, some relative who were following the child got that, and then it was very much evident that something is there in the child's laryngeal in the oropharynx. So then we asked the grandmother who was with the child that has the child eaten something which or has. Then she said there was some wedding function and the child has had mutton biryani and has gorged upon it 3 days ago, and since then he is showing this. So then we in the ER itself, because of the rapidly increasing stridor, and we sedated the child under mild sedation, and with McGill's forceps we could remove this bone piece. So again, if we go back, so here if you look, this is something which is there, but because of the head coming into way, and here it is little more prominent, little more visible, but it can be easily missed kind of a picture, and that was the reason the child overnight stayed in an ENT hospital and then next morning came to a pediatric hospital. So this is a newborn on nasal CPAP with increasing respiratory distress. So we don't have to see that this is this is something again pneumothorax, where you have paucity of vascular markings on the left side, and there is a mediastinal shift. And this is a 3-month-old child with 4-month-old child with bloody stools and has features of intestinal obstruction. And this is a child with dengue, which before this pandemic, we used to see a lot of these children who were in capillary leak, and we used to have this dengue children with severe capillary leak and effusions. So you can make out that there is a effusion line, and the right claustrophrenic angle is obliterated totally. So now we move on to the next X-rays and discussion. So this is the case. We'll start with the case and we'll go back to the whole discussion on the X-ray neck. So this is a 3.5-year-old male child who was involved in an RTA with a car and was taken to a nearby hospital within the next 5 minutes and was intubated as he was apneic and pulseless. So whenever you have something like this, you always consider that there is a cervical spine. Unless it is ruled out, it is involved. And that's what they have done. They have had a collar and they intubated, and they have taken care of the ABCs as much as they could, and they have shifted the child. So this is the X-ray. Neck was done for this child, and so there was no evidence of any fracture or dislocation of the cervical spine. So when we look at the cervical spine, we have to pay attention to certain things, that what is the alignment of the cervical vertebra, intervertebral alignment, as well as the alignment of the cervical spine to the skull. And then we take care of we look at the soft tissues. So we have to check the alignment from spine to skull and the interspinal. So before we go further, we have to see how is the anatomy of the cervical spine. So C1 is the atlas vertebra. So it is a ring-shaped vertebra, and the C2 is the axis where the odontite process is going into the C1, and they all have a particular kind of a alignment. And then the other vertebrae, they have vertebral body. So when we talk about spine and skull alignment, we have certain angles, and we ensure that. So this is the basion, this is the ophisthion, and this is the atlas and then axis, and then from C3, C4, and C7. So whenever we want to see whether the intervertebral alignment, we have to have 3 smooth lines. So the first line is the anterior vertebral bodies. The second line is the posterior vertebral bodies, and the third line is spinolaminar line. So if they are kind of in unison, they are of the line, that means there is no fracture or there is no dislocation. Then you also have to ensure the alignment of skull with the spine, and you just draw a line from clavis, and you go all the way to the basion. So this also needs to be very smooth. So from basion to the odontite process, it has to be very, very smooth. So if there is no disalignment, then you are clearing the alignment of skull with the spine. So then what about the prevertebral soft tissue? So when we talk about prevertebral soft tissue, because of the next particular structure, the up to C3, we have to ensure that the
Boss, your voice is not audible right now.
evaluate for that. Below C3, what you see is you have to measure the thickness or the width of the pre-vertebral space in relation to the vertebral body of C6. So whenever we are reading lateral view of neck, we always need to correlate with the clinical findings, and you should also visualize the C7T1 junction. So this is a 3-month-old child who has presented with fever of 2 days, poor oral intake, and with drooling of saliva since 1 day, and he has a inspiratory stride. So this is a toxic child with fever, who is not eating well, and who is drooling his saliva. So with the inspiratory stride, which is so easily audible, and the respiratory distress, which is very, very severe. So when we have something like this, we basically confirm our diagnosis that this child has got something which is here, placed here. The paravertebral space is much widened. So if you look at the C6, tissue with the paravertebral space is much wider. It's body, and this is a retropharyngeal abscess, which is kind of a surgical emergency.
Boss, your voice is not audible.
As quickly as possible. So one common presentation is
Chetan boss, your voice is not audible.
with fever of 2 days and poor oral intake with drooling of saliva and inspiratory stridor for a day. And this is how the child. So you can make out this is a child who has got audible stridor, is toxic, is having drooling, and has got poor oral intake. that's the severe respiratory distress, severe subcostal retractions he's having. So it's very evident in this that this is something which we are dealing, and we are doing the X-ray for just confirmation. So if you can focus here, the prevertebral space is much widened. So it is much wider than the vertebral body of the C6 vertebra. Which needs to deal with as a surgical emergency. So when we talk about laryngotracheobronchitis, we always talk about people just don't understand what exactly is the Stickle sign. So if you look at the larynx and the trachea, so what we see here is the picture. So this is like a steeple of the church. So if you this is the normal kind of a AP radiograph of the cervical spine of the upper airway, and you can call this as dome of the masjids, where the contour is very well maintained, and then because of the edema, you have this kind of angulation, which is something like an inverted V, and this is this is another child where you can see the pseudomembranous detachment in the trachea, where you have a actual tracheitis. Again, a very severe stridor, something like croup, but the child is toxic. Is little older aged child, and you can see that shading of the or a detachment of the pseudomembrane in the trachea. So another area where you end up getting a lateral X-ray is to look for adenoidal hypertrophy. And many times we are not sure where exactly is adenoid and where exactly is the palatine tonsil. So whenever you are getting a X-ray lateral for adenoids, make sure that the position is appropriate, and then you look at the soft tissue shadow. So this is the adenoid and this is the palatine tonsil. So if you go ahead further, so again, here is the adenoid, and here are the palatine tonsils, and you have got epiglottis, you have got epiglottic folds, and then there is a tracheal column. So at the level of C3, your oropharynx basically gets divided into the trachea as well as the esophagus. So that's how it is, and you don't have to worry about exactly how much size it should be. What we look at is what is happening to the nasopharyngeal air column. So adenoids are the extent, that is something which is significant. And then depending on the child's condition, the snoring, the quality of life, the quality of sleep in the night, then you carry on with your further treatment. And sometimes you have to, many times you have to take help of the ENT surgeon, and they will do the endoscopy and they will be in a better position to judge whether this child needs operative intervention or can be on medications. So this is a brief thing about the X-rays which we routinely see. The key is to not to take X-rays or something so routine, and we sometimes tend to give them a cursory look and we move ahead in especially when we are in a emergency situation, because there are so many things to do. But X-rays many a times give you a clue. So just pause and take a moment and ensure that you are doing it in a methodical manner, the reading of X-ray, and then very likelihood is that you won't miss any of it. You can take up questions or something.
Thank you, boss, for incredible session. I think we are able to see a whole lot of sick cases, right, ranging from sick to normal OPD basis, and it was good revision for all the cases which we see daily, with very insightful and very detailed view. And I really, in my opinion, the last shadow of X-ray lateral neck, that esophageal gas shadow, so even I usually don't see. This is good learning point for me as well. Interesting. So we are open for the questions in case anyone is having any questions. No, I don't think they are question, because it was in-depth explanation. In case still I get some questions, I'll forward them to you. Thank you for your time, boss, and giving us this opportunity to learn from you. Thanks a lot for taking our time.
Pleasure is all mine, Nitin. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you all.